Yo, what up, street dogs? There, Kim. All right, so the thought. What does it mean to be a man? So, obviously this is all just my opinion, so kind of bear with me. So the basic gist is, what does it mean to be a virtuous man, a great man, a man with grandeur, and what are my personal ideals towards what I consider the apex manliness or masculinity and so forth. So it kind of like, in the spirit of Nassim Taleb via negativa, it's good to talk about what is not manly. So a lot of this is based on my father, who I consider the most worst possible man and figure in my life. But I'm also grateful to my dad because he taught me what not to become, which is good. So, first and foremost, a man should never hit his wife, physically, verbally abuse his wife or girlfriend or partner or whatever have you. So, secondly, a man should never be petty, a man should never complain, a man should never cast blame on others. A man must take extreme responsibility for himself, his fate, and also, the conditions of others. Because the biggest issue is when a lot of people, they like to just kind of cast blame on judgment on others, you're essentially signifying weakness and meekness and also softness. And so for me, the ideal man is hard and strong. Because how do members of society tend to fail? We tend to fail when we start to scapegoat others. I think to scapegoat is probably one of the worst signs of weakness that exists, because when you scapegoat, you're essentially relinquishing control over your own personal life, your own personal actions and stuff like that. And to me, it's much more effective and manly to never blame nobody else, and also just kind of take it in good cheer, where obviously bad shit happens, but it's not really nobody's fault. I think that's the big thing, is everyone's always looking for somebody to blame, whether it be society, government, whatever. And I think the fact and the reality is cruel. Reality doesn't care about you, and there's no sort of mystic order of the universe now that exists. So as a consequence, you're kind of thrust into this ruthless world that is devoid of any sort of ultimate meaning, purpose, or direction. And therefore it's your duty to strive to become the greatest human being possible. This is where virtue comes from. It's essentially the art of greatness, right? Human grandeur, human greatness. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just guys. Girls could be great too. So, whether you're a guy, girl, whatever, and obviously I can't speak for women because I'm not a woman, but I can at least speak for us men. So I think my thought and my criticism would be, actually, in modern society, it's generally frowned upon to be aggressive, violent, stuff like that. And masculinity is seen as bad, right? You hear all these buzzwords being tossed around, and the big problem is, if men are not allowed to be men, then what is a man to become? A man is to become not man. A man is encouraged to be soft, weak, and meek, and to turn the other cheek. It's typical Christian morality, right? Now, I think actually a true man would not let nobody fuck with him, and not let nobody fuck with his, partner, wife, kids, family, friends, and stuff like that. So essentially a real man has a backbone. He's not like a jellyfish. He stands up for what he believes in and will not compromise his morals, his ideas, and his thoughts, whether right or wrong. So, we do live in a time where You know, I would actually say nowadays we're actually more intolerant than ever in terms of just free thought and speech. We're in an intolerant society in the sense that, you know, if you went to education in a liberal institution like I did, got my undergrad at UCLA and stuff like that, and, you know, lived in Berkeley, blah, blah, and I grew up in the Bay Area too. So essentially, men are actually not really allowed to be quote unquote masculine in the popular sense. So men aren't really, it's frowned upon for, you know, guys to take their top off, to flex their muscles, or even to have muscles in general. And it's better to be like soft, meek, you know, skinny fat, it seems like is the ideal that everyone's kind of going for. But truly, the great man is not only physically impressive, like, you know, big muscles, big guns, but also mentally tough, where he doesn't blame others for his lack of opportunities or fate, and also just kind of recognizing the reality that the world is unfair and will always be unfair and unjust, and that's just the fact of life. And so then comes the question, you know, we live in this unjust society and world, what is we to do about it? Then yeah, that's good. It's like, you know, you speak up for yourself, you stand up for yourself, you do what you believe in and stuff like that. And it ain't just enough to just talk about it. It's also to act upon it. Is, you know, you have all these morals, ethics, ideas, and thoughts. You need to put some sort of skin in the game. So this is where, whenever people are just informed about the news, but they don't actually go out and do nothing about it, they don't donate money, they don't, you know, have some sort of skin in the game, they don't put themselves at risk, then one's beliefs is actually not real. And so for me, I like your truck! So I think nowadays, no one's willing to have any sort of skin in the game, and this is why I don't trust nobody, and this is why I think the only living philosopher right now actually worth following or listening to is probably Nassim Taleb. He actually does have real skin in the game, and he actually does speak his mind, so I trust him. But almost everyone else who's a commentator or, like, you know, a consultant or just like another talking head, you cannot give them any credence because they are not exposed to any sort of true risk for their own opinions. So this is why I generally tend to trust the opinion of entrepreneurs and people who are self-employed more so than people who are employed by an institution or who have a 9-to-5 job, because like Nassim Taleb says in his Skin in the Game book, when you've worked too long for a 9-to-5 and at the orders of others, you do end up becoming domesticated. And what is the difference between a master and a slave? Master domus, which means somebody who does the taming of other people's. And so you don't want to be a domesticated house pet. You don't want to become a domesticated dog. The goal is to become the independent eagle, right? So once again, there are no moral facts. Immanuel Kant, I think, is if you understand his philosophy, he's a Scotch Puritan, which means, you know, everything behind his philosophy is about Puritanism, which is like, you know, kind of like in the vibes of like, you know, typical like Christian, you know, utilitarian, you know, kind of like Quaker kind of ideals, which is, you know, about meekness, softness, equality, and so forth. But if we think that none of this really exists and you do have the power to shape your universe, in some ways we kind of do need injustice, and we kind of do need the ability and the control to shape shift and to express ourselves however we decide to do so.